Hey all, I am Follygon, and in this video I'm going to be creating one of Sam Yang's characters. And along the way, I'll be answering some of your most common questions. But before I do that, click the subscribe button if you are new around here, and check out the links in the description for tutorials, my custom brushes, and more. My Patreon is where you can join my Discord server and do things like participate in fun art challenges. This character that I'm creating right now was one of those challenges. And here are some of the awesome artworks that came out of it. And congrats to everyone that participated. If you didn't get yours done in time, no worries, we're gonna be doing a lot more of these in the future. And if you wanna participate, like I said, you can join over on my Patreon. All right, let's get into some questions. There's quite a few that you guys sent in, but of course, I'll also be talking about the process on screen if anything interesting comes up that is worth noting. Cool. Let's get the big one out of the way first for everyone that is new here. What software and tablet do you use? I get this question on almost every single video, every single post I've ever made. The software that I am using here is called ZBrush. It says it up there in the top left corner, although it is pretty small. I make everything in here, and then I render in Blender, and I composite in Photoshop. And the tablet that I'm using is a 24-inch Cintiq. It looks like this, but probably a little more dirty because I slap my hands all over it all day long. You do not need a super large tablet like the one I have. I actually started on a really tiny, cheap tablet. I was like a $50 tablet at the time. I think I even bought it used. I can't remember off the top of my head. I would not go really big like what I've got here initially. I don't think they actually even make this one. They have some newer models. But anyway, I got the larger one after a number of years working professionally. Before this one, I had a smaller graphics tablet, and it was causing a lot of neck trouble for me, kind of staring down at the screen while I was sculpting 8+ hours a day. So I ended up getting a larger tablet to help out my neck and back, which I would highly recommend if you are going to be doing this for many hours each day. Another question I see a lot is something along the lines of, where should I start? And I know a lot of you are interested in getting into digital sculpting, which is awesome. I love to hear that. So you should sign up for my Patreon. No, I'm really only kidding. I have a playlist here on my YouTube channel called literally, Where Should I Start? I made this for people just getting into ZBrush. But if you don't have that, I would most definitely check out a free option like Blender first. This will at least give you an idea of if you even enjoy doing it or not. Kind of an important thing to figure out before you go spending a bunch of money on a different software. So I would start there, and then if you're considering making this a career or a long-term hobby, then I would start looking more into ZBrush. I also have a ton of high-quality tutorials at the links below, and an absolute butt ton of free stuff here on my YouTube channel that you guys can check out. Awesome, moving right along to the next question. How long does it take you to sculpt a character? This one is very dependent on what I'm making, of course. This one here on screen took a little under 15 hours. More complex characters obviously take a lot longer, upwards of 30 to 50 for a character like this one here. And larger projects can take even hundreds of hours. So it's really dependent on what it is that I am making. And then of course, putting together videos takes even more time as well, recording, editing, all that like I'm doing right now. But I try to focus most of my time on the actual art, on the actual creation process. Because if I'm being completely honest, I am not actually a huge fan of editing. How much do you sculpt / practice? That is an awesome question. I've actually seen a lot of variations of this question. I have another one here that says, do you sculpt a specific amount of time each day, or do you start sculpting and stop whenever you feel like it? So way back when I started, when I first decided, this is gonna be my career and I really wanna, kind of push into this as hard as I can, At that point, I was doing about 3 hours or so each night. I was also working a full-time job as a front-end web developer, web designer, so that was a lot of fun. But I wanted to kind of switch up my career, so I was really putting in a lot of hours in the evening, late into the night, to try to make that a reality. And then after I landed my first full-time sculpting gig after doing some freelance work for a little while, I was sculpting for about 8 hours or more each day. each weekday. And then on the weekends, obviously a lot less time. Take some breaks from sculpting. It's good for you. Currently, for me, there are many other adjacent things that take my time. I run an online art school and mentorship program called the Appeal Academy, and that takes a lot of my time. I also mentioned earlier how I record audio and edit these videos, and all that takes time away from sculpting, of course. But I still try to focus as much of my time as I can on the actual art creation. I actually always have ZBrush open on my machine, and I don't really turn my computer off. I just kind of put it to sleep so that I can wake it up nice and fast, and then get back into sculpting whenever I need to. But yeah, as for now, I sculpt at least a couple hours each day. I've been trying to actually slow down on weekends this year. That's something I really want to do. So I don't sculpt every single day, but pretty dang close. All right, I'm gonna hit pause on questions for just a quick second to talk about what's going on screen. So originally with this artwork, again, shout out to Sam Yang or @SamDoesArt. Originally, I was going to go for this pose, this kind of yoga pose. I can't remember, upward facing dog or something. I'm not a yoga master, I don't know. Either way, I was going in this direction at first. I had actually quite a few issues with getting some things to line up in 3D and also with the 2D image, and I wasn't a fan of how much, some things were kind of pushed in the 2D. I love this artwork that I am working off of here. It's absolutely gorgeous. But when a 2D artist is creating a piece, and I've talked about this in many videos in the past, they are not really considering that work being translated to 3D. So some things will either be cheated intentionally or, probably unintentionally a lot of the time. But this causes a lot of troubles for things being translated to the third dimension. Some things are just drawn from a certain angle to make it more appealing for that specific image. And sometimes those things, when translated to 3D, they might line up from one angle, but from another it looks kind of silly. And that was really starting to happen here with this sculpt. Specifically, a couple things that I can point out. The ear ends up sitting really far back on the head, kind of absurdly far back. Some of the proportions in the face get pushed kind of to the breaking point. I was starting to get it heading in the right direction, but I really wasn't a fan of how pushed it was and how it was kind of working in 3D. So I ended up changing directions and going more towards this piece here, which I'm very glad that I did. This one had a lot less cheating going on in it, although it still did have some. All 2D artwork pretty much does. This one, I'm very glad in retrospect that I decided to head in this direction, and I'll come back and talk more about it here in a little bit, but we're gonna go ahead and do some more questions. A question that I really don't see a lot, but one that I wanted to include here was someone was asking for some tips for practicing and improving your art. I feel like a lot of the time I don't see this question. I feel like it's the most important thing that you can be doing, practicing and, having some exercises to improve. So recently on my Patreon, I released a tutorial that includes 5 separate exercises that build in skill and difficulty with each, all with the goal, of course, of improving your sculpting. The exercises range from very beginner-friendly for the first to more advanced for the last 2, which specifically target improving and developing your own personal style. So that tutorial is available on my Patreon, and then I also have a simple $1 doc on my Gumroad that includes some exercises that specifically target practicing and improving your art as well. There are so many different exercises and things you can do for practicing, even unrelated to actually doing artwork, that, there's really a lot to talk about with that topic. I've made some other videos on this in the past. I'll actually link a video up in the top right-hand corner if you guys are interested in learning more about the topic. How do you stay motivated? I used to get this question all the time when I live streamed, and I would always answer it the same way. I would say, I don't know, I just am a very motivated person, and I always kind of found the question a little difficult to answer. I don't like the word motivated when it is pertained to art. I feel like with art specifically, it's kind of a misnomer, or it's a little ephemeral. I prefer the word want or desire. I feel like that's a better description of what it is to be motivated for your artwork, because there are going to be a lot of very difficult things that you are going to have to do to most likely achieve your artistic goals. If one of those wants or desires is to work, professionally in the industry, you are going to also have to want or have a desire to put in that crazy amount of hard work that it is going to require to get there. And I think by getting rid of this word motivated and throwing it in the trash can and instead using this word want or desire, I really think it kind of puts it more into perspective for how much how bad do you want it, essentially, is kind of what I'm trying to get at here. But as for some quick, few, easy tips in terms of staying motivated, staying with that want and desire, I would say, number one, community. Surround yourself with people that are better than you. Number two, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Don't exhaust yourself. Take it slow. Know that it's going to take some time. And then number three, there are going to be many ups and many downs. Anybody who, quote, has made it has gone through many, many downs along the journey to get there. There are hills and there are valleys. And social media does a good job of only showing all the ups and very rarely showing all the downs. And I have always been very candid about this. I am fine with showing off nasty, terrible, old artwork. I don't mind, and I actually do catch a lot of flack for it. People will say, oh, that looks like crap, and I'm like, yeah, it does. I didn't spend that long on it. Or of course, everybody has a bad day here and there. It's cool. It doesn't faze me. I'll do better on the next one. And that's what it's about. It's about knowing that there are going to be good days and there will also be bad days, but you have to be prepared for both. Going back to talking about what I'm doing on screen here for a brief moment before we continue with some more questions. At this point, I have gone more in the direction of that reference image that I showed you previously, getting away from that yoga pose, starting to develop on the facial features more. Sam does some really cool, subtle things with his proportions that I'm a big fan of, and I think a lot of you probably are as well. So I'm starting to push on a lot of that here, starting to refine some stuff like the shape of the character's ear, starting to warp some of those proportions to be a little bit closer to his artistic style. He's got a lot of really cool stuff going on there. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the process and maybe learning something new. And of course, if you guys have any other questions that you don't hear me answer in here, you can always throw them down in the comments below, and I would be happy to answer as many as I possibly can. Back to questions. This person wrote, say I want to be a character artist, but I can't remember faces. What should I do? That is a really great question. So I am not sure if you have something like a cognitive disorder like face blindness, but there is a very famous artist named Chuck Close who recently passed away. He suffered from face blindness, but he painted beautiful portraits. So even with that disorder, he has accomplished a lot. Like I said, he recently passed away. Not only did he have face blindness, I should also mention he was a paraplegic. He would hold the paintbrush in his mouth, and overall a very inspiring person. So if Chuck Close can do it, I think that you probably can do it as well. And I'll be honest here and just take that a step further and say, hey, if I can do this, I think you can too. And Chuck Close is actually known for a really famous quote here, and I would like to read that really quick. The advice I like to give young artists, or really anybody who will listen to me, is not to wait around for inspiration. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. If you wait around for the clouds to part and a bolt of lightning to strike you in the brain, you are not going to make an awful lot of work. All the best ideas come out of the process. They come out of the work itself. If you're sitting around trying to dream up a great art idea, you can sit there for a long time before anything happens. But if you just get to work, something will occur to you, and something else that you reject will push you in another direction. Inspiration is absolutely unnecessary and somehow deceptive. You feel like you need this great idea before you can get down to work, and I find that is almost never the case. I just really enjoy that quote. I find it really inspirational. That is the full quote. A lot of the time you hear inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. That's kind of the shortened version, the TLDR if you want to call it that. But yeah, very inspirational guy. Unfortunately, no longer with us. Left us with a lot of inspiring art and maybe even more inspiring words. Next question. You've been sculpting for a long time, and you recently decided to expand your skills by taking up drawing. Yes, I did, with my fiance on our YouTube channel called Drawbly. Hey, check it out. Are there any more creative skills you wish you could learn, or do you have any plans to expand your abilities even further? Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, Drawbly is a YouTube channel that my fiance and I started where we are trying to learn to draw and paint. It's been a mixed bag of success, as art often is. In terms of other pursuits in my life, I have been studying Japanese for quite a long time. I actually, years ago, nearly a decade ago, lived in Japan for a short time and studied Japanese there. And then took maybe like an 8-year hiatus on studying Japanese. Just kind of fell out of love with it, I guess you could say. And recently, last year, got back into it, and I've been sticking with it. And I've really been enjoying it, treating it much like art, as a marathon, not a sprint. I've also been really into bouldering, which is a type of rock climbing, but smaller and harder. So that is another pursuit of mine. But in terms of creative pursuits, I would love to learn how to play piano. I know how to play guitar, but I don't do it very often. And I would love to learn more about music theory as well, sometime in the future. And I'm sure there will be many other creative things I will want to pursue in the future. But for now, at least, drawing and painting is more than enough for me. How long have you been into digital sculpting? This question is a little bit of a toss-up because a lot of people will answer this and just say, 1 year or 2 years or 3, whatever. That doesn't really mean anything because one person's 2 years could be something completely different than someone else's 10 years. And that was how it was for me. My first 2 years of digital sculpting, I ended up going from absolutely zero to working as a professional digital sculptor in the toy industry. So my 2 years was like some other people's 10 years, and this differs wildly for every single person. And that is because of density. Someone that sculpts every single day for multiple hours is obviously going to progress a lot faster than someone that only sculpts once a week. I started sculpting around 2014, so roughly about 8 years. I sculpt pretty much every single day, as I mentioned earlier, for multiple hours. I would say I have probably about a 95% hit rate in terms of sculpting every single day for the past 8 years. So I've been putting in a lot of time. I love sculpting. It's my job, but it's also my hobby, and I love art, which is why I'm really trying to get into drawing and painting. I absolutely love this question. How do you pick up sculpting after something like a 1-year break? Is there a warm-up I can do or something to help ease back into it? So I always recommend that you find a project that you know for a fact is just below your skill level, and do that. That is a great way to get back in. If you are trying to get back in, the last thing you want to do is something that is beyond your skill level, or maybe even something at the level, that you were doing previously. It's been a while. For this person, it had been a year. So I would say try to do something that you know for a fact you can complete. It's not always about learning and improving every single time. Sometimes it's about getting back in and having a win and being successful. And that is a great way to do exactly that. When could you test Blender in the future and give your opinion? I love this question. I use Blender all the time. I use it for rendering. I like Blender, but I also like to make fun of the often cultish community. I don't think that the sculpting toolset, in my opinion, is up to par with ZBrush, but hopefully one day it will be. I would love for that. I love competition. I love having more tools to choose from. In terms of actually making a video about it though, I don't know, maybe sometime in the future. I would love to know how I can start earning some income through my work. Is freelancing a good start? And if yes, how? Freelancing is a great way to get started, but you have to understand that you are competing against working professionals. So either your skills will have to be at that level, and you're gonna have to objectively compare yourself to them. And I'll just say now, you most likely aren't yet, which is absolutely fine. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Or you will have to take much smaller jobs, which is also fine. It's great learning experience. You will get some practice and a little bit of money to boot. But for these things, the budget is going to be much smaller. So just kind of understand that going in. So hop on Reddit or other forums and websites out there where people post these kinds of personal little jobs. There are tons of them, and with a little bit of research, you should be able to find many. All right, that is the end of my list of questions that I had from you guys. I wanted to briefly talk about some of the process here at the end, and then show you some of the extra steps that I took on this character to not only stylize this character, you know, the forms are stylized, as I often work on, but also things like the lighting are stylized on this character. There's, you know, unrealistic lighting, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But first, I'm just kind of finishing up the last little cleanup here on the face, trying to get things as pristine as possible. You can see from the front view some of that proportional warping that I was mentioning before. When I pull up the reference image, I have it lined up with the sculpt, and things are hitting the mark. You know, things are lining up pretty well, but when we rotate around to the front, there's maybe a little bit of awkwardness where there's some stretching, or maybe some of the facial features kind of feel a little misplaced. This is totally natural and just some of the awkwardness that kind of comes when you are translating something from 2D to 3D. There are some workarounds for all these things, but there are, you know, so many variations of things that could potentially be wrong, so many different types of little cheats or warping things that can happen in 3D. Like I said, no fault of the 2D artist, just kind of something that naturally happens with all 2D art. All right, awesome. I want to talk here about this image right here, which is my initial render out of Blender. Like I said, I render in Blender, and this is my attempt at getting the lighting for the character as close as possible. And you will notice some differences between this image and the reference in terms of the lighting. And like I said, that is because the lighting is stylized. There are specific shapes that are being made here that are somewhat just not probable with the forms in the face, the forms on the neck, the hair, etc. So here is my little bit of work here as I continue to composite this image in Photoshop. Just a little bit of changing for the background to gray it out, just get that a little closer to the reference image. I pretty much always do the same process on every single sculpt. I brighten the character, I get a little bit more warmth in it. It's really just a quick few minor tweaks that I do to pretty much every image. Then from there, a little bit of a more subtle change that you might not notice, but here I am just blending out some of those stray strands of hair, doing a quick paint over, which I'll be doing more of here in just a moment. A little bit of brightening for the eyes to get those a little bit closer to the reference. And then my first pass here at doing some of that overpainting. So I actually exported this image and I threw it into Procreate and I just kind of painted over it, creating some of the lighting. So you can see the difference there with the neck where we're getting that interesting shape and that new kind of plane break that's happening there with the side of the face. Just kind of flipping back and forth there between the two. And then some final tweaks here for other things that, like I said, are stylized. You could quote say cheated, I'll say stylized here. An example being the blending around the cheekbone, some other areas being darkened, some highlights added to the eyes that I just hand painted, and some brightening that happened to the ear there. And again, I'll just kind of flip back and forth between the two so you can see the differences. So hopefully that was illuminating for you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching the process, getting to hear me answer some of your most asked questions. But like I said, if you guys have any more, feel free to comment below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you'd like to learn more about digital sculpting, check out my links down below. There's a link to my Patreon where you can join my Discord or my course, The Appeal Academy. A lot of great links down there. Check them out. And of course, click that subscribe button if you're new around here. I'd appreciate the click, but hey, I appreciate you just kind of being here till the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully it was informative. Hopefully you learned something new and enjoyed yourself. And hopefully I will see you in the next video. So until then, you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys again in the next one.